Hello, and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Liz Cavell, and this week we've got a special show for you. We are speaking with Hemant Mehta. He's the friendly atheist. You know him, you love him. We're going to discuss some of the things that have been going on this week. We'll discuss the Christian nationalist pastor Doug Wilson, the National Day of Prayer, which is big stuff taking place tomorrow, and an over-the-top response that we got recently from an FFRF complaint. Joining me in the studio today is FFRF attorney Chris Line.
Hey.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah, let's just...
Should we welcome Hemant?
Yeah, it's really, I'm glad that we've got you today here, Hemant. I know the whole time I've been here at FFRF, like 7 years, I basically read something you've written almost every single day. You're like the atheist news source, like the go-to if I want to know what's going on in the atheist world. You're on top of it and you explain it in a great way. So we're glad to have you on and have a chance to talk with you, talk about some of these issues on our show here.
I appreciate that. And so much of what FFRF does informs so much about what I write about. So I appreciate all the work you all do too.
So many of you are already aware of Hemant's work, but for those of you who don't know who he is, Hemant has been writing about atheism, religion, and politics since 2006. He writes the Friendly Atheist blog. It's extremely popular. It's currently on Substack. He also co-hosts a podcast, the Friendly Atheist Podcast, regularly produces videos on YouTube. So thank you so much, Hemant. We go way back in the state church movement. It's really good to see you. Thanks for crossing over with us today.
Absolutely. It's always fun to talk about these issues with all of you.
Yeah, fun is definitely how I would describe it.
Yeah. So
For lack of better word.
So we can go ahead then. We'll start off with a story that you recently covered, Hemant, on your blog. A couple weeks ago, far-right pastor Doug Wilson was interviewed by Tucker Carlson, who billed him as the Christian nationalist they warned you about. Well, he certainly lived up to that reputation and posted a video a few days ago entitled FAQs on Christian Nationalism. Why don't you tell us what he said and what your blog was about, and we can show that video clip too.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson, like you said, introduced him, or at least on X/Twitter, introduced him as like the Christian nationalist they warned you about. And the thing is, Doug Wilson does not like that label of Christian nationalist because he equates that with a theocracy. And he wants all of you to know, no, of course he's not for a theocracy. He's just for pushing Christianity through the law. And someone, I think, asked him, and he does Q&As on his website all the time. Someone asked him, well, then how do you make that work? How do you actually push Christianity into the law in a way that people would say is legal?
So if we are not to have an established church at the federal level or established churches at the state level, in what way could America ever be considered a Christian nation? This could be done in various ways. The president could issue a proclamation that acknowledged that Jesus rose from the dead, and Congress could authorize the funds to have that proclamation printed and bound, read in all the schools, and posted in all the federal courthouses. That could be fun. The Supreme Court could take up a new religious liberty case, ideally one with Jack Phillips in it, and in their decision they could reaffirm and reboot the decision of the Supreme Court in the 1892 Holy Trinity versus the United States case, in which the court determined that the United States was in fact a Christian nation, and had been such from the beginning. Or the Apostles' Creed could be incorporated into the Constitution. None of these actions would establish a particular Christian denomination as being the mascot of the government.
He's like, for example, the president or the Congress could pass a law declaring that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. That was a good one that he views as sort of just fine with, not an establishment of religion, just fine with the First Amendment, but something that could be done legally that would be easy peasy. Another one was maybe either doing the same thing or pushing that message in public schools as well, which he viewed as perfectly
Yeah, no, my
copacetic
favorite,
with the First Amendment.
yeah, my favorite actually was the Supreme Court suggestion, because the Supreme Court can take a case. He noted preferably a Jack Phillips case.
Yeah.
We want a Jack Phillips case to then declare within that opinion, that we're a Christian nation.
I mean, he's basically saying, let's get the legislative branch or the judicial branch to do the dirty work for us. That way it doesn't feel like an establishment of religion. But if you have Congress pass a law that says we're basically a Christian nation, like Liz said, if we just pass a proclamation that says Jesus rose from the dead, if you do that, that would allow that proclamation to be read in the public schools and posted in courthouses. And if the Supreme Court takes up a religious liberties case where someone says my religion gives me the right to discriminate against people I don't like, then the Supreme Court in its decision in that favor could also say, well, it's a Christian nation. And if you do that, then schools and textbooks can start saying that. That's his path to saying it's a Christian nation without taking the step of effectively declaring the U.S. to be a theocracy. And he says it's okay because we're not saying Lutheranism or, Catholicism is our religion. It's just Christianity. We're all good with that.
Yeah, I love that. It's really important. He points that out at the end of his video, which is we're not establishing a particular religion. We're just saying with the force of government, Jesus rose from the dead. I mean, everyone believes that, right?
Yeah.
Everyone.
I thought his most bizarre suggestion, though, was adding the Apostles' Creed to the Constitution.
It's just riffing.
Yeah,
no bad ideas in a brainstorm.
But why? It's just why? I don't know how he landed on the, if you're going to add to the Constitution.
Especially as he toggles back and forth between, there's nothing sectarian about this. This is just all ecumenical. But then it's, the Apostles' Creed should go in the Constitution. And
the Apostles' Creed is very much a Jesus rose from the dead and not, for example, something. I would guess if I'm in a Christian nationalist shoes, I would do everything I can to get, seemingly innocuous statements like "In God We Trust" everywhere I could, or something like that. Doug Wilson doesn't play that game. He's like, let's just get the prayer that talks about Jesus and everything I believe and just shove it into the Constitution, which tells you how little he knows about how the Constitution gets changed.
Yeah, it's just the roundaboutness, I guess, is what really is better. Why not just, if you're amending the Constitution anyway, just be we're a Christian, we're a non-denominationally Christian nation, whatever it is that he's trying to get to with the actual,
I said, Chris, he's just workshopping some ideas. But what's actually really scary and serious about what he's saying is it's kind of a small step from what Christian nationalists who are in power right now are tolerating and are infusing court decisions with and government action with, which is this, what used to be called ceremonial deism and civic religion ideas, and the idea that it's harmless to sort of put the government stamp of approval on religion in general. You can see that that's always been a slippery slope to exactly what he is proposing, all these ideas.
This is exactly what FFRF has talked about for a while when it comes to "In God We Trust" and variants of that were added to proclamations as our national motto in the 1950s, "Under God" and the Pledge of Allegiance. They seem innocuous. They seem inoffensive. But then Christian nationalists use that inroad to do more bigger establishments of religion down the line. "In God We Trust" is our motto, so now we can have a giant Christian cross on public property maintained with taxpayer dollars. They use that small little thing to do something much more harmful down the road. And clearly Doug Wilson is giving away the game here. I mean, he's bad at it because he's not taking the baby step. He's taking this bigger leap and saying, whatever, Apostles' Creed, stick it as a new amendment. But then he says, why does he want to do this? Because it's a way to get Christian values, and only his Christian values, into public policy, which is what he really wants. He thinks that would be a better world for all of us, better country for all of us. And his method of getting there is by doing what he believes is a small step of like, just issue pass a resolution saying Jesus rose from the dead, and then we'll get to impose Jack Phillips' version of religious freedom, which is anti-LGBTQ discrimination, into the law.
Right. And you can, the thing that like really telegraphs the harm of what courts and Christian nationalists have been doing and building on for decades, is that rationale he's using, even though it doesn't match the suggestions he's giving, the rationale that like, you know, we're not privileging individual sects of religion, we're just sort of acknowledging that there is religion generally. It doesn't make sense with his suggestions, but it is the poison that lives in all of these court decisions that have been built upon since the 50s, well, the 80s.
And it's really disturbing because Doug Wilson's version of Christianity is one that says, oh, during the pandemic, when everyone's trying to isolate at home or wearing masks, this is a guy who said, you know what my faith teaches me to do? Let's hold a massive indoor church service for 1,000 people. No masks, no social distancing. Oh, women? No. Husbands get to control their spouses and they get to control their wife's votes. Like, this is what Doug Wilson's church teaches its members. And so to have a guy like that saying, here are the tools we theoretically could use as baby steps to impose our Christian will upon everyone else. I mean, it's only fair to say, what does Doug Wilson's version of Christianity look like? And I think it's one that even Christians would say, I'm very disturbed by this.
Yeah, and that kind of highlights, too, why it's so important that it matters what Doug Wilson is saying. You might say, like, well, Doug Wilson, I mean, he's not an elected official, you know, this is, you know, that sort of thing. But the point is that people like Doug Wilson are able to say the truth, you know, whereas these Christian nationalist politicians are smart enough to go, okay, well, I do have to temper my message to ensure, you know, that I can get into power so that I can implement these things. Whereas we can look to these people who are able to say, well, I don't have the incentives to tone down my message. I'll just say what I really think and what we're really trying to do here, and then allow the politicians to kind of walk back some of it and things like that. So that's why it's so important to listen to these people.
And not just that, but piggybacking on what you said, Chris, Doug Wilson is not some fringe preacher. He's not some random guy. He and his church and his ministry have basically started taking over this town of Moscow, Idaho, and it's not very different. I mentioned this in the article I wrote. There's another preacher who I don't think has the name recognition nationally that a lot of other pastors like Joel Osteen might have. There's a guy named Andrew Womack who basically did the same thing. He runs a ministry out of a town in Colorado, and he has made no secret of the fact that if we can get the numbers high enough, we can start taking over the town. We can elect our people as city council members. We can elect our people to take over the school board. And while they haven't taken over the city council, they have taken over the public school board. And there are many mainstream articles written about what they've done to that school board to basically destroy the public schools and try to steer it in a more religious direction. So Doug Wilson may not be familiar to some people viewing this, but this is not some cherry picking of a random dude saying some silly thing. This is a powerful preacher who commands a giant ministry in what may be a small city. You know what I mean? And when you have those types of numbers, this stuff is not just theoretical. It can actually be implemented, barring lawsuits and whatnot.
And by the way, his political ideology is shared nationally, yes, by a minority of Americans. But, you know, there's a reason why he's given a shout out to Jack Phillips, who is, you know, a darling client of ADF, which is the alma mater, you know, workplace of the Speaker of the House. I mean, this is not unfortunately, the political ideology that drives guys like Doug Wilson is not on the fringe. It's actually got a tremendous outsized power and influence in our government, not just in these small towns that get taken over, but on the national stage. So it's
all the more
important.
reason to expose it now before they get that power, rather than wait till, oh, hey, all of a sudden a Doug Wilson acolyte, or at least an ally, hey, he's the Speaker of the House now. And now it's really hard to put a stop to anything they're doing policy-wise. So all the more reason, if you don't know the guy's name, you should be aware of people like him and what they are doing and what rhetoric they're using to try to influence their people to say, yeah, we could totally do this, and we can try pushing Christianity into policy in this way. See, it's fine. We're not saying it's a denomination. It's not a sect. It's just Jesus. It's totally fine and legal.
That's right. Well, speaking of theocrats, tomorrow is the National Day of Prayer. This is an annual holiday. FFRF has already sent quite a few letters to elected officials in cities about this year's National Day of Prayer. Cities and municipalities sponsor events. They issue proclamations, basically in support of prayer, which is, in our view, a violation of the First Amendment, but has been given, great wide berth by our courts. And so we deal with this every year. It's the first Thursday in May. So here we are.
Yeah, and did you see from the imagery, nothing weird about the sword with the cross on it, nothing ominous or
they went
scary
full
or
crusader
terrifying.
energy this year. Every year that it has a new theme. Chris, why don't you give us a little rundown of the history of the National Day
Yeah,
of Prayer?
for sure. As many of you are already aware, the National Day of Prayer is a sectarian event. It originated with Reverend Billy Graham during his evangelical crusade in Washington, D.C. in 1952. He expressed an openly Christian purpose, seeking an annual prayer proclamation by the president because he wanted the Lord Jesus Christ to be recognized across the land. Subsequently, the National Day of Prayer Task Force was created to communicate with every individual the need for personal repentance and prayer, mobilizing the Christian community to intercede for America and its leadership. So, as you said, the task force issues an annual National Day of Prayer proclamation, submits them to the president, choosing a theme with supporting scripture from the Bible. And as we saw in that picture, this year's theme is Lift Up the Word, Light Up the World, based on Old Testament verse 2 Samuel 22:29-31. The 2014 National Prayer actually openly embraces Christian nationalism, referencing the Seven Mountains Mandate. We actually have a clip of the official 2024 National Prayer.
Jesus, we profess our faith in you. You are the light of the world, and in you there is no darkness. For you are our lamp, O Lord, and our God lightens our darkness. Forgive us for fearing and focusing on the darkness around us instead of being filled with faith and shining like a city on a hill that you've called us to be. Forgive us for the times where we have been the absence of light that has allowed darkness to dwell in America. Lead us forward to dispel the darkness and bring light throughout the church, family, education, business, the military, government, arts, entertainment, and media. In the mighty name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
So that probably sounds familiar to some people. Church, family, education, business, military, government, arts, entertainment, and the media is one.
Weird, that's 7 things.
Yeah, it's the Seven Mountain Mandate, or the 7 aspects of society dominionists seek to influence. It's right there wrapped up in this event. Another thing to point out, you could hear all the Jesus, it's very Jesus-oriented for an event that every single time we write to a city, they like to come back. And of course, this is not Christian. This is a prayer event. Everyone who prays should come to our National Day of Prayer event, trying to sort of disguise the fact that this is clearly for Christianity and meant to advance Christianity.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence that, we have this election year and the theme is like this bellicose, dark versus light, just like very dominionist ideology. They can choose whatever theme they want. There have been other years where it's been more or less, militant or more or less ecumenical, but it's always super focused on Jesus Christ. And I have to say, there's something so weird about praying to Jesus while looking into a camera.
Yeah.
We have to try it sometime.
Yeah, that was very unsettling in the video.
You got to do it publicly, otherwise Jesus can't hear you. And so they have to make sure. I mean, it's the fact they give away the game too when they mention the 7 mountains, because they want to pass it off as this is for people of all faiths. We're representing everybody. But like if Muslims or Jews or Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons try to take over, have influence over the military or church or anything like that, or government, they would be the first ones in line trying to put a stop to it, because they don't want that to happen. They want their version of Christianity, and only their version, to be the one that takes over and influences all those 7 areas.
Of course, and that has to be the case because we're a majority religious country. So it turns out every single area currently is dominated by religious people of
It has
various
pretty
stripes
healthy
and stripes.
religious influence in
Yeah.
all of those
Yeah.
things. I think we're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Christian dominionism is, this very sort of hyper focused part of the Christian nationalist political ideology, right? It's like a belief that it is the job of Christians to take over every single facet of society, and that includes government. That is completely antithetical to our American system of government and our Constitution, but yet it is what so many of these Christian nationalists believe. Like, that's the Doug Wilson ideology. It's that dominionism is the goal.
Yeah. No, it's so extreme. I mean, it's just bizarre always to see this because, I'm a very fervent atheist who is alarmed by religion, both in our government and the fact that people believe it. But I have no problems with a good leader being religious. I would not demand that I don't demand that every single person I vote for and every leader be an atheist.
But that's not what
it's
it means, as you well know.
Right.
That's not what it means. It doesn't mean we want to raise up disciples of Jesus to go forth and implement his values through service in these areas of society. It means you got to get into the positions of power and then impose these extremely conservative Christian beliefs through those channels of society, which are two very different things.
Yeah.
One of the mountains is not let's show them how to help the poor and hungry and let's lead the way in volunteering. It's like, no, let's take over the government.
Yeah, education.
And for those people to say, let's take over arts, entertainment, and media, it's like, buddy, we've seen what you produce when you
No,
make
thanks.
those films and movies. I don't need more Kevin Sorbo in my life.
No.
Yeah, for sure. So we are trying to push back a little bit. FFRF is co-sponsoring a Reason reception on Capitol Hill tonight, featuring guest speaker Kate Cohen, a Washington Post contributing columnist whose column this week titled "A National Day of Prayer, James Madison would be horrified." In it, she urges Americans to join her in abolishing this unconstitutional law, instructing the president to urge citizens to gather together in prayer. And also, once again, fortunately, Rep. Jamie Raskin has introduced a resolution declaring May 4th as the National Day of Reason.
Right, which, shouldn't be necessary, but I do think to make a through line here, we had Doug Wilson in the first segment proposing the wild, harebrained idea of issuing a proclamation saying Jesus rose from the dead. And that's absurd, and it's clearly establishment. But here we have the president issuing the National Day of Prayer proclamation every single year on the first Thursday of May, which has withstood federal court scrutiny, despite the fact that it clearly puts the government stamp of approval on prayer. And so what we're relegated to is pushing back with a National Day of Reason, which notably does not favor any religion or non-religion. It just reaffirms the fact that reason-based policy is what we can all agree on in a secular republic.
Yeah.
And it would be nice, this doesn't have to even be political. It would be nice if more politicians recognized what the Day of Prayer was trying to do, as you guys have pointed out here, and push back against it, because no one's asking them to say, no one should be allowed to pray. We oppose anyone who is religious. We're not even asking for that. But for Republicans, Democrats, anyone else to say we oppose the day of prayer, the organization running it, what they are saying with their videos, as you played earlier, we're fine if you want to pray. We're fine if you don't want to pray. But to support that particular group and the events they are putting on the day of prayer, that should be something a lot of politicians recognize as endorsing a specific brand of Christianity that I would argue is harmful. And it's always troubling that so many politicians just go with it, they co-sponsor it, they speak at the event because they wrongly see it as just pro-faith and not pro a specific version of faith that actually counters what they're trying to do politically.
Yeah. Right. Like it has, as Chris pointed out, like the heritage of this event and the proclamation is like the Billy Graham school of, Christian ideology. It is very conservative. It is very white, hetero, patriarchal version of Christianity. This is not some ecumenical celebration of faith in our society. And so you're right. And I think part of what gives it or makes it so firmly entrenched amongst our elected officials too is that, again, it dates back to the 50s or the 60s, whatever. I should have paid better attention to you when you were giving the history. But, it goes way back. And so it's one of those things where once these things get entrenched, it's so harmful because it's seen by later elected officials as something that has some sort of historical significance or, that there's some type of value, civic value in just the tradition of it. And of course, it continues to be harmful. It takes on new forms as new forms of Christian nationalist ideology take hold, political ideology. And of course, meanwhile, as the tradition goes on, the American public gets more and more diverse, religiously plural, and it becomes more and more of an egregious violation as our demographics continue to shift, but our government continues to endorse the National Day of Prayer.
Yeah, not even, like you said, people you're sort of jumping on board because of the historical nature. There are probably, there are a lot of politicians who don't want to do it, but then feel that they're pressured to because they're like, well, I can't be... Our town has done it for 20 years. Like, I can't be the first mayor not to do this. What if then I'm not going to be reelected,
Right. Yes, of course. Yeah. Speaking of spineless elected officials, we have sent letters at FFRF to the city of Winter Garden, Florida, the Seminole County Sheriff's Office in Florida, and several others about their National Day of Prayer events. But the letter we sent to Mayor Randall Weddle in London, that's Kentucky, prompted a very unique response we had to share.
Yeah. So we wrote to Mayor Weddle because he's hosting a Mayor's Prayer Breakfast on May 2nd, 2024, the National Day of Prayer, at the London Community Center for the National Day of Prayer. The event's being advertised on the city's website and official social media pages. FFRF Patrick O'Reilly legal fellow Hirsch Joshi asked the mayor to refrain from participating in the sectarian event in his official capacity and that the city refrain from promoting sectarian events like the National Day of Prayer. Well, let's take a look at, we broke this into 3 parts because it's a little bit long, but let's take a look at the mayor's dramatic response.
Hello, London. This is Mayor Weddle. Most recently, we made a post about an upcoming event, the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast that we're doing at the Community Center on May the 2nd, starting at 7 a.m. We made that post, and days later, we received a letter from Freedom from Religion Foundation. Before I become mayor, small groups has always attacked me. They're always constantly trying to place their political desires or gain over what's good for our community. We wanted to do this Mayor's Prayer Breakfast about community coming together in a positive manner. As Americans, we have the right to assemble and we have the right to pray over our community. We have the right to pray over its leaders. Not promoting any one religion or any in particular faith, but as a community, us coming together and us praying as a whole. We all know that without faith, our community would be lost.
Yeah, so very dramatic there. He just...
Our community would be lost, man. But they're not endorsing faith.
Right, and I mean, yeah, he's not wrong. Yeah, you know, citizens of the city can assemble for prayer and things like that. That's, if you read our letter, which he's got there with him, we didn't say stop having, National Day of Prayer events. It's just the city can't sponsor it. He as the mayor can't be running it. They can't be using the city's resources to do it. If some churches want to hold a National Day of Prayer event and he wants to show up in his individual capacity as a citizen, he's free to do that. He can participate all he wants, but that's not what he's doing. He's saying it's the mayor's prayer breakfast. He's putting it on the city's website. They're putting it on the city's social media page saying, everybody come to this event. This is
the
our
city's
city
hosting
prayer
it. We're
event.
using city resources to make it happen and to promote it. I'm spending my time as your mayor promoting it and now defending it, apparently, and producing this video.
And trashing people who disagree, apparently, along the way, in the spirit of unity.
In the spirit of unity, yes.
Right.
And I love how the video starts out, because speaking of like giving the game away, and there's obviously a through line here, because we're hearing all the same, gaslighting defense of promoting one specific religion while telling your constituents that actually you're not promoting a specific type of religion, just like any religion that prays to Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior.
Right.
Like, I don't understand what everyone is attacking me about, right? Like, there's that ideology, or there's that persecution complex. The whole video starts out with how, as long as he can remember, groups have been attacking him for, just trying to bring people together with Christian prayer.
I love how the thing he's calling an attack is a letter that pretty much amounts to, hey, we understand the law. You're making a mistake. We're trying to correct you before it becomes a problem, because we also want everything to be unified and you to represent everybody.
And by the way, your constituents, it's your constituents who are reaching out to us to tell us how ostracized and alienated they feel in their own political community because of your actions.
Yeah.
That's an attack.
How dare you attack him with the facts?
Yeah, well, it's tough being the most powerful person in a city.
So anyway, he goes, let's watch the second part.
Yeah, I wish that was the end of the clip. Let's watch more.
In this letter, it demands that we don't have this prayer meeting. It demands that we don't assemble ourselves together in our faith. It demands that that my office stops this. It tells us that we are not to proceed due to the constitutional rights of others. As mayor, I've always believed this. I'm a mayor for all the people that live in London. I believe that my office is here to serve everyone that lives here. But to say that we shouldn't assemble ourselves together and pray by any organization or anyone to demand us not to show our faith, I will not cave to these demands. Our community will not cave to these demands. We will not cave to the demands of individuals who do not live here, reside here, but think that we should not be able to assemble ourselves together and unite as a community and pray in our faith. They think they're winning by sending this letter to demand us to stop, or they will sue. And this is where I urge you, London. We cannot take little groups and allow them to control the progress of our communities, our state, or even our nation. Little groups have controlled so much in this nation for so long.
Yeah, which little groups and what? I mean, a couple of things to put out there. He said, our faith, our collective, the faith of all, the faith that we share. We all share the same faith here in this town, which of course is not correct. His obsession with little groups and like these little groups that are controlling, and it's just like, well,
because the people who run the National Day of Prayer are so little with a budget that is that no one can afford. I mean, no, those are ridiculously large organizations putting on these events. They are backed up by people with plenty of money and plenty of political power. And again, he said in that clip you just showed, like, he's doing this for everybody, everyone in the community. Except literally the people he's trashing in the exact same video because they don't share his faith.
Right. It's just this fundamental lack of understanding, and we've gotten this for as long as we've been trying to engage government actors to cooperate for the betterment of all of their constituents, which, by the way, it bears pointing out, that is not a demand letter. You can go look at it on our website. It's a letter trying to engage the cooperation of an elected official. And what is the fundamental misunderstanding of so many of these government actors is that this is not some outside group that does not reside in London. This is a complainant who is in or near your community that is bringing this complaint to our attention because they don't feel safe raising the issue themselves because of the environment that you are creating by privileging faith, God believers and prayers in your community. And so there is a problem with what you profess to be your goal, which is to be the mayor of all the citizens of London, Kentucky, and your actions, which basically privilege some members of your community and make second-class citizens out of everybody that doesn't agree or pray the way that you do.
Yeah, no, and that's the unfortunate part that, like, even, or I guess the disingenuous part, of course, is that, like, if we could then show them, like, okay, well, here's three people from your community who share, you know, this, here they are.
Right.
You'd be like, well, that doesn't change anything. It's like, okay, so what?
So it's not about the outside group.
Yeah, it's not about the fact that we're an outside group. And also, I mean, even...
I'm very curious how many people are speaking or participating in this event in any sort of leadership role who don't believe in his particular religion. Like, what other minority religious groups is he bringing into the fold to help run this event? I mean, he could very easily get non-religious representatives to talk about like Day of Reason type of stuff if the goal is to bring everyone together to celebrate whatever it is you think. But he's not interested in that. He's making that clear.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, I'm making some judgments here, but even, you know, London, Kentucky, I'm sure is more Christian or has a larger demographic of Christians than generally. So it might not be hitting the 30% or whatever non-religious, you know, of the country, but it's still not zero. I can promise that it's not zero.
I promise that too.
That any community is not 100% Christian.
Every one of your constituents does not share your faith.
Yeah.
Just hard truths.
And if you were trying to unify them, as we've seen time and time again, if you're trying to bring people together, religion is the worst possible tool to use to do that, because there is no way to talk about religion in a way that doesn't alienate a large group of people. And by the way, it's not just people like us who are atheists. It will alienate a lot of Christians who don't want to see their faith co-opted by the government for some political tool.
Yeah. Well, let's watch the final clip here.
So I'm asking you to bind together with us, not as your mayor, but as a fellow citizen of this city, of this county. On May the 2nd at 7 a.m., we're going to be there, and we're going to show our faith. And I'm asking everyone else that believes, whether if you cannot be there, to pray, but if you can attend this, come, show up, and let's show that one small group or one radical ideal will not stop us. Because here, we understand the importance of faith, and we understand the importance of prayer. London, this is a time that we come together as a community, and this is a time that we stop that little small group from controlling what the masses does.
Yeah, well, first off, I mean, he's just coming to you as a private citizen, you know, with his mayor sweatshirt on a video produced by the city and posted on the city's Facebook page. You know, just like any citizen could do.
And again, you're speaking to fellow believers, but claiming that you're the mayor of all people. There's just a fundamental disconnect between how you understand your constituency, because you are a theocrat. Right. You only view people as faith as your constituents.
And they don't recognize that just because it's the religion shared by the majority, you're the mayor. You literally take off your citizen hat because your job is to listen to people you may disagree with and represent them too. And he clearly has no interest in representing people who don't share his religious beliefs.
And it's such a fundamental misunderstanding too of the genius of American constitutional protections, because the whole purpose of our Bill of Rights, which includes our Establishment Clause and his beloved right to assemble, is to protect the minority, the small groups, from the tyranny, as our founders saw it, of the masses, which he is, speaking to in his, sign off there. It's like, you're not going to stop the masses, you little minorities, from, having government power behind what we want to do. It's like, that's the whole fundamental greatness of the American Constitution and our Bill of Rights. It's just a lack of understanding of the value of American constitutional rights. Like, it's only seeing their value when they work for you and when you're in the majority.
Yeah, no, you really point out strongly this idea that I always see that happens to these things of the persecuted Christian majority. I was like, that we're the majority by far. Our views are correct, as that everyone believes in, but we just keep getting stopped by this very tiny population of people keeps stopping us from doing all these things. And it's because they have to have it both ways. They can't either be the majority or, be persecuted. It's like we're the majority, most people agree with us, and we're being persecuted by these tiny outsiders when it's obviously not the case.
Why do the smaller groups keep getting in my way of imposing my will upon them, he says, as he holds up a pocket constitution somewhere that he's never read.
All right, well, in lighter news, I guess, our final story has just been something that's been blowing up over the internet the past couple of days, so we're going to throw it out there. Brian Cox, a famous actor who portrayed Logan Roy in HBO's Succession, or more importantly to me, Captain in Super Troopers, and has been in like every movie ever for the last 40 years, expressed his skepticism of religion in a new interview on the Starting Line podcast. He said it holds back humanity as a tool of patriarchal control. True. He called the Bible one of the worst books ever. That's a quote. It's been blowing up. Here's a short clip.
Do you think that religion holds us back?
Well, considerably, yes. I think religion does hold us back because it's belief systems which are outside ourselves. They're not dealing with who we are. We're dealing, well, if God says this and God does that, and you go, well, what is God? We've created that idea of God, and we've created it as a control issue. It's Adam and Eve. Eve is, the propaganda goes right the way back. The Bible is one of the worst books ever, for me, from my point of view, because it starts with the idea that Adam's rib, that out of Adam's rib this woman was created, and they'll believe it because they're stupid enough.
Well, you said it. As you can imagine, the internet has a lot to say about Brian Cox's plain-spoken, dissing on the Bible, but he raises some excellent points.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I don't know, I still get so happy about things like this, where it's just like things I hear people say every single day as an atheist part of a movement who reads these things, talks to other atheists and stuff. But when you just see someone famous say what we've all been saying for forever, and then it goes all over the world, and it just...
Brian Cox says Bible is the worst book ever, all over the internet.
There is something about a celebrity, whether it's Logan Roy, whether it's Brian Cox, whether it's Daniel Radcliffe, saying things like this. Like, yes, Chris, things we hear all the time because we're part of this community. But to hear them say it, it breaks through in a way, and it gives permission to other people to say, oh, I was thinking that too, but I didn't know I could say something like that. And man, every time they can deliver it with an accent, it seems to be so much more potent.
There's something about not being American that I think there's just something so joking aside, there's something very we know that religion is just this obsession in our culture, in terms of the politeness and the civility, warnings about like how you treat religion in our society, you know, and it's wrong to criticize religion in our society, and it's just like not the done thing. I think there's something like very American about how self-conscious we are, not we in this room, but we as a culture are criticizing religion.
It is funny because I try to keep tabs on things people are saying about atheists or atheism because I write about this stuff all the time. And when I heard what Brian Cox was saying, I'm like, I kind of shrugged it off because I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, I've heard that before. But one, not everyone has heard things like that before. And it means more coming from a celebrity during a podcast interview where it's reaching an audience that we may never reach. But the other thing about that is I cannot tell you how kind of impressive it is when that particular soundbite gets mentioned in so many articles that my feed is suddenly filled with people talking about that comment in a way like the clip you just played with that mayor of London, Kentucky. To me, that's a much more serious problem that needs to be addressed. What Doug Wilson said earlier, that is a serious problem that needs to be addressed. What Brian Cox said is one of those things, yeah, it's a nice thing to hear from our point of view. But other than that, he didn't say anything we haven't heard before. And yet, that's the story, that's the clip I have seen in so many articles. And that's the whole point. When you have people saying the things that we have heard so many times, but they're outside our community, they're speaking to an audience that's outside our community, that sort of reach makes a huge difference. It's kind of refreshing to hear a guy like that say it, because he's not doing it in the context. I don't know what that interview was about. It probably was not about atheism.
No, it probably was
It's just
not.
something that came up organically in whatever it is they were talking about.
Right.
But the fact that it comes up in that context means it's going to reach an audience that's very different. And that's important for people to see, whether you like him as an actor or not. That's the sort of thing that actually makes a difference in a way. I mean, I wish the other things we talked about would make a bigger difference. But it matters a lot when people in those positions use their platforms to talk about this stuff.
Just a famous guy sharing his own personal views on religion and the Bible. You know, we're not like all our other clips. These are not like powerful government actors imposing their views on the rest of us. This is just a famous guy in movies that we love, sharing his own personal ideas. But you're right, Hemant, those ideas will reach so many millions more people because of just the power of that platform. And
if people are mad about it, what are they going to be mad at? The show Succession, where they don't talk about that? Are they going to be mad at, like, what, the podcast for allowing a guy to speak? No, it's just a dude using his private platform to talk about this stuff, as opposed to that mayor who is using the city's resources to do it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that feels like a more hopeful place to end, and we're kind of out of time. Thank you so much, Hemant, for giving us so much of your time and talking with us. It's always so fun to talk to you. You are like the atheist, like patron saint of like atheist journalism, and we all love you and follow your work and rely on your writing so much. So thank you so much for talking with us.
I appreciate that. Right back to you, Liz and Chris, for all the work you do, and at FFRF, everyone there, because what I do wouldn't be possible without your work, and I appreciate talking to you both about this stuff.
Thanks, Hemant. And that concludes Ask an Atheist for this week. Please don't forget, we also have a weekly broadcast TV show, Free Thought Matters. This week, Annie Laurie Gaylor and Dan Barker will be featuring highlights from our 2023 National Convention. It was right here in Madison, Wisconsin. Our speakers included comedian Liz Winstead, lawyer and author Ellie Mistal, and Washington Post contributor Kate Cohen. Here is a preview.
We were waiting in line at the deli, and another shopper, pushing a cart with a couple of kids of his own, asked my daughter if Santa brought her anything good for Christmas. I thought this was a really dumb thing to ask a kid you don't know. I mean, this was in Albany, New York, where schools close for Yom Kippur. And I was trying to think of a way to tell him off, but, you know, nicely, when my daughter said to him, "Santa Claus is just pretend." Just like that. No attitude, just handing over information. I do my best writing about atheism and religion when I manage to channel the matter-of-factness of a 4-year-old.
You can see Free Thought Matters on TV stations all across the U.S. It's also on FFRF's Facebook and YouTube channels.
And don't miss Free Thought Radio. This week, guest host Amit Paul will be speaking with Indian social activist and human rights campaigner Shabnam Hashmi. You can find Free Thought Radio at ffrf.org/radio.
And check out the latest episode of our We Dissent podcast. In that episode, we talked with Baptist Joint Committee's Amanda Tyler. We discussed BJC's Christians Against Christian Nationalism campaign. And Amanda took us to school about Baptist history, their strong history of supporting state-church separation. Listen and subscribe to We Dissent wherever you get podcasts, and check us out online at we-dissent.org.
If you want more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, check out our website at ffrf.org. If you're a member already, thank you. If not, please join us, and see you next week on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.